One of my favorite features of the test quiz in Schoology is the ability to build in automatic feedback so that students can see what they got right and what they got wrong the second that they submit their work, and so that they can see why they got the answer right or why they got the answer wrong. However, the problem with this feature is it really opens up students' ability to cheat. Let's say a student finishes and they get a 100% and it shows all of their correct answers. They can easily take a picture of that and send it to their friends so that their friends can simply copy their work. There are 3 strategies that we can utilize in the test quiz feature to prevent it from being easy to cheat. We're going to walk through these 3 strategies by first talking about randomizing the answer order, then talking about pulling randomized questions from test banks, and finishing with randomizing the question order. But the strategy that I really want to emphasize, and the one that I think is the most powerful, is the second strategy, pulling randomized questions from test banks. In your resources in Schoology, you have the ability of adding a question bank. And the benefit of the question bank is you can create a whole bank of questions that are of a similar style, and then the question bank can generate random questions for different students so that each student has different questions on their test quiz. Please note that you can only create question banks within the resources. You cannot build them in a course. So if you have a group already with your PLC, I'd recommend going into the resources for your PLC's group and creating your question bank there. If your PLC doesn't have a group, that's okay. You can create the question bank within your personal resources. So once we're in resources, we can go to add resources, add question bank, and provide a title for the question bank. And hit create. Now if I scroll through my whole mess of resources here, I really need to come in and organize it, we'll see that this is the icon for a question bank. It's like a little test quiz inside of a folder. Let's click into it. And at this point, it's gonna feel exactly like creating a quiz. We'll go to add question, add multiple choice, and we're following the exact same process as creating a quiz. I also want to point out that if you already have a test quiz in Schoology that could serve as kind of your jumping off point for your question bank, you can scroll to that test quiz, go over to the gear, say edit questions, and then up at the top we have the option to add questions to bank. The default is to select all, but I could also pick and choose which ones I want to add. I'm going to select all of them. I'll hit next. And at this point, I have the ability to go into my resources. I was in my home resource, and I could either add it to an existing question bank, or I can create a new question bank. If it's my personal resources, I'm selecting home. If it's my PLC group, I'm going to select my PLC group from my drop-down. And now all of those questions are in my question bank. Now that I have all of my questions here gathered in a question bank, I'm going to go ahead and implement the first of the strategies to prevent cheating, and that is to go into each question and select that I want to randomize choices. What that's going to do is it's going to make what is letter A for some students, letter B for other students, and what's letter B for some students, letter C for other students, etc. Every student is going to see their answer choices in a different order. Keep in mind that this strategy isn't great for all question types. Really, I probably wouldn't want to use this randomized choices feature for these questions because option A on all of my questions says this sentence is already in parallel structure. that same sentence is my option A every single time, and it probably makes the most sense for that to always be option A. Similarly, if I have a all of the above answer choice, I don't want to randomize choices because all of the above should be the last answer choice. And if I randomize my choices, I could end up with all of the above as my answer A. So there is this option to randomize choices. Just be mindful of whether that option is going to work well for the type of question and the type of answer choices that you have. So now that we've decided whether or not we want to randomize our choices on our questions, let's move on to our second strategy, which is pulling random questions from the question bank that we created into test quizzes in our Schoology courses. So to get these into a course, go into courses and go into where you want this quiz to live. And I'll do add materials, add test quiz. All of this is exactly like normal. Now, when I go to my add question, I'm going to select from question banks, and I'm going to choose the option to do random questions. Now I'm going to select my question bank that I just created, and I'll hit select. And I'm going to tell it how many questions I want to pull. I have 10 questions in my bank. I'm going to tell it that I want to pull 3 questions, so that will create a 3-question quiz, and I'll end up with all kinds of different varieties of that quiz for each student because I have way more questions in my bank than I'm asking to be put on my quiz. And then I can tell it how many points I want each question to be worth, and I'll hit add question. And now I'll see that I am giving 3 random questions to each student. My next strategy to help prevent cheating is to go into the settings for that check-in for the test quiz. And here where it says randomize order, I'm going to select yes, which means that the questions are going to appear in a random order, and that could just add even more differences from one kid's quiz to the next, especially if I'm doing a larger quiz. In this example, I only am doing a 3-question quiz, so there's only so much I can randomize 3 questions. But if this were instead a 10-question quiz that I am pulling from a test bank of, let's say, 30 questions, there is a lot of room here for randomization and for it being challenging now for students to cheat off of one another. While I'm in these settings, I'm going to go ahead and enable the submissions. My personal preference is to give students 2 attempts so that they can learn from their mistakes. I like to set my formatives to resumable, and I like to set them to yes so that they can see whether they got the questions right or wrong. And I'll hit save changes. And now I have an excellent multiple choice formative check that is now very difficult to cheat on.